Hi everyone, this is James from Titan Drones. Today we're going to be modding the Mavic 2 controller. Some of the tools that you'll need is like a nylon pry tool. I have this little metal tool here, but it's not a necessity, it's just something I like to use. I use a little razor blade just in case there's some glue inside there I have to get out. Your T6 Torx screwdriver, and then your number 0 Phillips head. And then this is our mod kit, which we'll get to, your cabling, your bracket, and these are your QMA plugs that make for a nice easy install. I use a 9mm socket, but you can also use a 9mm wrench to tighten these nuts at the end. All right, so this is probably gonna be pretty similar to the Mavic in that you're gonna start right here on both sides and remove that with your Torx screwdriver. All right, just like the Mavic, you have these caps here. I just pull them off with my hand. You may have to pry yours depending on how tough it is. Just like that. All right, now this is where you want to get your pry tool at. You have these two spots here. So you can pick your nylon tool, or like I said, I like to use this metal tool. But I'm careful not to mar the plastic, and just get under here. Get under here, and thank you DJI for making this one a lot easier than the original Mavic, because that was pretty simple. And once you pry up, you'll notice here that there's a little gap. That's when you can get your nylon tool in there and pry up. Comes off just like that. And if you don't want to lose these, please remove them first. All right, now just as I suspected, similar to the Mavic Pro, you're going to have two Phillips head screws here. You're going to remove those. All right, something that's a little bit different than the Mavic Pro is you'll notice here and here, these are two little connectors that you want to unplug before you separate your clamshell. So this is more similar to what you would find probably on the Spark or the Mavic Air. So just be sure to undo these two connectors. Just like that. And the same thing on the other side. Please use your nylon tool for this. Okay, and now you're ready to separate your clamshell. All right, remember to remove your 5D button here. Just pry up on it. Same as your Mavic, comes right out. And now to separate your clamshell at this stage, I like to put my thumb here on this rail and hold it and then separate it. Just pry apart. You're going to end up with this, and you just set this aside. Pretty similar to the Mavic. There are some differences though. The main one being is you have a flat cable here that we're going to have to take off before we remove the keyboard assembly, and you have a cover here over your main keyboard that we're going to have to remove. So we can start here, and just like all DJI cables, you're going to want to pry up on the little retaining clip holding the flat cable in until it's pointing straight up, and then you can gently pull this out. Take your time. Okay, and then you're going to take your number 0 Phillips head and remove these two Phillips screws. All right, now remove this little cover. All right, similar to like a Mavic Air, now you have this push connector on your keyboard. And you're just going to pry up on that. Okay. Now you're ready to remove the screws to remove the actual keyboard assembly. And that's done with a Phillips head. All right, there's going to be 6 Phillips head screws around the perimeter. You're just going to loosen all of those. All right, now to remove the keyboard assembly, obviously make sure this is unplugged. And then, just like the rest of the Mavics and Sparks you're used to, comes right out like this. All right, now we're going to get ready to remove the battery and display. You'll see a piece of tape here holding down this wire. Go ahead and remove that tape. You can set it aside and reuse it once we go to reinstall everything. All right, and then there's going to be 4 screws on the perimeter. 1, 2, 3, and there's going to be 1 in here. You're going to remove those 4 screws. All right, once your 4 screws are removed, always make sure to pry up this connector here. I call it the main connector, but just make sure that's undone before we take out the display. Just like that. All right, now you're going to remove the whole battery and display assembly. Now be careful, don't just go yanking on this, because there's going to be probably a connector on the bottom, just like this, same as your Mavic. So just like any other flat cable with Mavic, you're going to want to pry up on the black retaining clip until it's pointing straight up, and then you can push out the disconnect the ribbon cable. This one happens to have some tape holding it down, so you're going to have to undo this tape first. All right, it's actually double-sided tape, so you just pull up gently and then set that aside. All right, now you can see you have your 2 coax connections here. These are IPEX connectors. They have this cable run this way, and a little piece of felt holding it down. So we'll start there, and you can get it out from underneath the felt. All right, now this part here, let's pay close attention to. The best method that I found to do this, because you do not want to rip the connector off the board. That would be a bad thing. So I like coming down here to where the cable meets the connector. All right, and that's where you're gonna pry up and twist at the same time, back and forth. And just go slow. Don't lift straight up. Kind of hinge it. Comes off just like that, and then you leave the connector intact on the board. You want to make sure of that. All right, same thing on the other one. Follow your lead until the cable meets the connector. Wiggle back and forth as you're hinging upwards, if that makes sense. There you go. All right, now it's time to pull out your factory antennas. So just like with the Mavic Pro or the Spark or the Mavic Air, you'll see it has these little retaining pins here that's holding it in place. There's a couple methods you can do. One would be to take pliers and squeeze here while pulling out at the same time. You can do that, or take a pair of your pliers and actually twist this while you're pulling this. Either method is fine. Either method is going to allow you to keep this antenna intact in case you ever want to go back to stock. All right, the method I prefer is to take my pliers and grab right towards the end of one of these where it meets the opening, and then I kind of twist it, and as I'm twisting it, I put some pressure and push, and you can already see it trying to go through the hole there, just like that. Same thing on the other one. So that's the method I use, but again, picture this in the housing. You can also grab your pliers and pinch these together as you pull on the antenna on the outside, you'll get the same effect. Right, now we're going to replace the cables inside with our cabling. First step is you're going to take our QMA cable, which is basically quick connect. You're going to undo the nut and take off the washer. And please throw this washer away. You do not need it for anything. Please do not use it. You're going to take two, I call them QMA plugs, but basically what they do is they encapsulate your cable like that. And you don't even really have to put the nut on right now. You can just feed it through like this. You'll notice on here there's a little tab. We have a corresponding tab on here on two sides, so just make sure you choose one of those sides. And what you're going to do is feed the cable through, line that tab up with the notch in the QMA plug, and you're simply going to push, and that's it. Now you're going to notice some play in this, but this is going to tighten up once you put the bracket on. This is normal, as long as you can't pull it out easily. That's in there. And you're going to do the same thing on the other side. All right, and the same thing on the other side. Feed your cable through, find the notch, push. There you go. All right, now it's just time to make your connections. Since they put this little felt tab here to kind of hold down the cable, might as well reuse it. It's not that critical, but why not? And then I like pushing this cable up against the top of the controller there just to get it out of the way. Now obviously this cable's longer than stock. I may or may not actually make some that are shorter or have some made. But for now, let's make our connection. Now to do this is something else you want to be careful of, is I see how I kind of put the top on first, just sit it there. Do that just to make sure it's seated correctly, and then I use my thumbnail, or I use like a soft blunt object, almost like the back of a little screwdriver or something. But anyway, you're gonna push down all on the back and on the front at the same time to seat your connection. You should hear like just a real faint snap, and you're good to go. I mean, if you pull like this and it's not going anywhere, you're fine. All right, now we just got to route the cables to where they're out of the way. All right, I'm gonna run mine like this. Kind of just keep the cables out of the way of the flat cable when we go to reinstall it. Put some tape here to hold this. Before we button it up, always make sure your connections are still good. This top one, I'm gonna run kind of like that. I like to keep the cables kind of in one layer. Try not to stack them on top of each other, because then it may take up room when you go to button this thing up. Something like that should be fine. Alright, you can push this flat cable back in here and then push down on the retaining clip. Just like that. And then remember that piece of tape that was behind it, you can seat that back. Alright, and then we're going to take this, make sure all your cables are out of your way, and you're going to replace this assembly here. It seems to fit. All right, everything's in order. Then you're going to replace the 4 screws. And these happen to be silver. I don't know if DJI is going to change the color or not, but just for reference. Okay, now make sure to push this connector back in. You should see the screen flick on for a second, that's fine. Okay. Now we're going to reinstall the keyboard. This is your keyboard. You'll have 2 pins here. You want to make sure, obviously, to use those as your guide. Make sure your buttons are still actuating. Seems fine. All right, now you're going to take your 6 screws that go around the perimeter. You can start reinstalling those. All right, and make sure this side is pushed down all the way so you can reconnect this cable. And you can, I had mine plugged in just to make sure, but you want to make sure you still have access to that, obviously. Give your buttons pressed, seem like they're working. Take that black piece of tape that you saved in the beginning. Go ahead and replace it. Okay, now you're going to reinstall the 2 flat cables. There was one here and one here. This one just gets pushed on once it's lined up. Make sure that's on well, because you don't want to go back into this after you're done. Now, if you'll remember, this one had a little retaining piece on it. Line that up. And you had 2 of the tiny screws. You got a little pair of tweezers, that might help you too at this part, but it's not too bad. All right. And then this one, make sure the retaining pin is pointing straight up, which it is. I'm going to seat this back in. Once you get that line pretty parallel, then push down on the retaining clip. All right, now it's time to reinstall your front cover. Basically, you're just going to line it up. In the middle here, these 2, if you put some pressure on them, they snap right into place. And then just gently go around the perimeter, make sure everything's snapped together. And DJI made this one really easy to get back together. That's it. And then what we're going to do is reconnect this connector and this connector here, and same on the other side. You'll see a similar location there. So you gotta make sure to reconnect those. All right, give it one last push on both sides, make sure they're in. And now we're ready to replace the bottom shell. All right, before we replace the bottom shell, make sure to replace your 2 Phillips screws. At this point, you should probably only have 4 screws left, 2 Phillips and 2 Torx, just for reference. And then you'll do the same thing on the other side. All right, now you're going to replace the bottom cover. So it's pretty easy. All you do, just line up that USB hole with the USB, and then just start pushing the tabs down. You'll hear clicks, obviously. And that is pretty simple. All right, once that's done, everything's firm, then you can start taking your caps and replacing them. And again, they'll just snap on. Same on the other side. And then you're gonna put your 2 Torx screws back in. All right, tighten down your 2 screws. Again, that's a Torx bit. I believe it's a T6. We'll have another one on this side. All right, and then just make sure to push your 5D button back into place. And then the last step is installing our bracket. Now this bracket, remember, do not use the lock washers. You should have thrown those away in the beginning. Your bracket sits on top of your QMA jacks like that. And then you take the nut only, no lock washers, and just secure it by hand first. Okay, and then take your 9mm wrench or just a socket and just do this by hand, please. Don't go crazy. Just tighten that down. You'll notice when you tighten it down that took most of the play out of this from these things, but everything's nice and solid. Black matches the black, so it kind of looks like it was meant to be there. Now you're ready to interface with a multitude of Titan drones antenna systems. All right, now that you're modded, you're ready to interface with pretty much every system we have, because this is OcuSync 2.0, which is dual band. So you could go just as simple as snapping on whips, and these whips are dual band when there's no amplifier involved. And what we do is, you just set them like that, and then we have this little thing here, which is what we call an antenna spacer. But we use this to go over it. It keeps the proper space, and then it also stops the whips from flopping around because of the quick connect adapters. So you can snap that on. It's not going anywhere. And these are 5 dBi dual band, so you can fly with just these. You should get a little better performance with stock with just these. But these were, these are basically developed so you can replace stock in case you ever want to just, fly around for fun, or you don't need any type of amplification. So let's say you wanted to fly non-amplified directional. You'll take your short cables here, and if you order our switch kit, whether it's 2.4 or 5.8, it's going to come with all this that I show you. Snap those on first. This just happens to be a 2.4 control. You would twist that on our T-lock mount, and then just make your connection on the back side by pushing it in. That, and now you basically have unamplified directional 9 dBi circular polarizer in here on this one. Now let's say you wanted to do amplified. You have basically the same options that I just showed you, and unhooking it's the exact opposite, by the way. You just literally unsnap them, do a quarter twist, and it's off. And you have both options I just showed you, directional and omnidirectional. You can amplify them as well. So twist on your switch amp panel, make your connections. All right, now, right now there are no antennas inside of this. This is basically, your amplifier, your battery, and charging system, and your indicator, and your button, and all that. This allows you to hook up the antenna based on your flight environment or what you're going to be doing. So if you want to fly, amplify directional, then your switch will come with a second set of these short cables. You can snap these on, twist on your directional panel. As you probably guessed, make your connections. All right, now you have amplified directional flight capabilities. So you would just turn your amplifier on, power on your controller, and you're ready to go. Now let's say you want to fly with omnidirectional capabilities, and I recommend omnidirectional amplified whenever you have physical obstructions close to you, like trees or buildings, and let's say within 2,000 feet of you. I like omni, and I'm willing to bet you're going to use omni most of the time, but there are cases, obviously, for directional when you have more open area and you're just looking to cut through Wi-Fi congestion. Directional really is the strongest signal you can get. However, you have a very narrow beam width. So if you have any physical obstruction close to you and you're shooting a directional antenna at it, you have the chance of reflecting that signal off, and you could get worse reception than stock. That's common. So, but Omni seems to do well in almost any environment, actually. And then this is basically amplified Omni. So Omni, again, is 360-degree RF coverage. It makes a 360-degree bubble around your RC, so you don't have to be always pointing your RC towards the aircraft or worry so much about physical obstructions and reflecting your signal. So again, if you're flying an amplified Omni, you turn on your amp, and then you power on your controller, and you're ready to go. So you have a few options with the switch, and then another new option you have, because this is the Mavic 2, is you have everything I just showed you, but the 5.8 version as well. All right, once again, this is James with Titan Drones. This is the Mavic 2 RC mod video, and then also we showed you a couple of our products here. But once this is modded, you can pretty much interface with everything we have. So feel free to check out the website and let us know if you have any questions.